you or a loved one suffer from chronic intelligence addiction?
We have a game for you. CIA, collect it all. It's a great game. Even Jeremiah over there is excited for it.
Okay, so there's 3 different types of cards. There's techniques, reality checks, and crisis cards. For the technique cards, that's pretty much how you solve the crises. Each one has a different type, like OSINT, HUMINT, GeoNet, MASSINT, and SIGINT. Some of them are related to satellites, which you can see through this little image right here. They all have their intelligence aspects, which is social, military, economic, and then weapons, like on this card. They have a difficulty range, which is what they can solve, 1 to 7, which will be covered on the crisis cards. And they have special, like, individual aspects where they can be not affected by, or they can only target certain crises.
These are reality check cards. These cards have certain effects that can either help or hinder a player's current strategy. For example, this reality check will help a player by expanding the range of their techniques by 1. So if used for this card here, the range expands from 3 to 7 to 4 to 8. Meanwhile, this reality check, which hinders a player's progress, counters certain techniques. As this counters a MASSINT technique, this cannot be used.
And last but not least, we have the crisis cards, which each crisis card has a different point value to it. So for example, this one has a point value of 1 or 2 or 3. Point values also indicate how many techniques must be used to solve them. So for example, this one has 1, only 1 technique needs to be used. Then we have the name of the crisis, that is an actual real world crisis that has happened. We have the difficulty of the crisis, ranging from 1 to 9. There's no such thing as 10 apparently. And then we have the different intelligence aspects of each crisis card. So as previously mentioned, we have the social or political, the military, economic, and weapons. And each technique must attack using one of the intelligence aspects. So for example, this one has a military aspect to it, so it can be used to target this military aspect on this crisis. So each round starts with each player getting a hand of 7 cards from the collection deck, which includes reality checks as well as techniques. And then the center of the table, or they call it the field, gets 5 of the crisis cards out of the crisis deck. But if there's 3 or more players, it gets 10 crisis cards in the center. Each game starts with choosing the player who has watched the spy theme film or TV show the most recently, and play continues clockwise past them. So the first player starts off by choosing a crisis that they want to solve and throwing out a technique or 2 techniques, depending on how many the crisis card requires, and any reality checks that they want to use to help them with it. On each player's turn, they use however many techniques and reality checks that they want to use to solve certain crises, and opposing players get to use reality checks to try to stop them from being able to solve the crises. Then once everybody has had a turn to try to stop the first player from solving the techniques, if the player's strategy has survived and is still able to overcome the crisis, they win that hand or win that crisis. If they fail, any techniques and reality checks that they use that have not been touched or messed with or countered stay in the field of play. So then any other player can build off of those techniques. A maximum of 3 reality checks may be used by opposing players to completely stop the first player from solving the crises. So on a player's turn, they can only try to attempt to solve 1 crisis at a time. If their again, if their strategy succeeds, they get to keep the crisis card, and the victory points that they earn are based on the point value of it. So for example, if I were to solve this crisis, I would get 2 points added to my total. At the end of each player's turn, they have to redraw from the collection deck to get another hand of 7 of reality checks and techniques, as well as any opponents that used reality checks. They have to draw until each player has 7. If there's a crisis missing from the field, it must be replaced. Again, if a strategy fails, any technique that was played but not countered stays in play with the crisis. And each round, or each player's turn, is just that, a turn. Each round of the entire game, however, is based on having each player play a turn. So, for example, if it's just me and Pablo, one round would be my turn and then Pablo's turn. If there were 3 players, 4 players, it would be my turn, Pablo's turn, and then that 3rd or 4th person until it gets back to the original starter. Once the final round is concluded, or once enough rounds have been played to where a player or more has at least 10 victory points based on the crisis cards again, the game concludes. First person to get to 10 victory points wins overall. However, if multiple players scored 10 before the end of the round, those players essentially go into a runoff where it's based on whoever scored the most points. If both players have tied on that end, say 2 players have got 12 points, it's based on how many whoever solved the most crises. And again, if there's another tie there with both the point value and the crisis count, then both players win. So here's an example hand, or example turn. So we're going to start by choosing a crisis. I choose to do the Russia defense reform. As you can see, there are 2 there's point value of 2 here, so that means I have to use at least 2 techniques to solve it. So I'm going to use the documented media exploitation because it falls in the difficulty range. The range is 4 to 8, and this is a difficulty of 7, as well as it matches the social or political and military aspects, intelligence aspect. So I can play this card, and I can also play the international monitoring system because again has a range of 5 to 10. This is again a difficulty of 7, and it has a weapons aspect to it. So there we go, and that's Pablo's turn.
Unfortunately, I only have 1 reality check, but luckily it counters. It specifically, I can use aggressive counter intel to counter is document and media exploitation, for it is a human technique, so that you'll need to use something else.
So then, because I have this awesome reality check called Think Outside the Box, I can counter any other reality check. So therefore, I can use it on his aggressive counter intel, taking it out, making a discard pile. So now, since Pablo has no other counters for me, I essentially win the crisis. I get 2 points, and I get to throw these in the discard pile. Then I get to redraw, as well as Pablo. Now, if there were more players with us, each player would have a chance to do a reality check on my technique. However, since there's somebody named Joseph Turley that's recording the video and refused to play with us,
I hate them.
we can't explain that further. But overall, this is a really fun game and totally recommend it.